All right, so in a walking alone and together, we're in a minor key now, and the first phrase of this song is really all about this D minor chord, and then a 2-5, a minor 2-5 sound over and over again. Now, typically when you play a minor 2-5, there are a variety of different ways that you can voice that minor chord. Some people just choose to play a minor triad. Some people use a minor 6th chord for a particular sound, and that gives a certain vibe, minor 7th. Some people even use a minor major 7th sound. And that's pretty nice because it kind of invokes the sound of melodic minor. So you have a lot of choices there. So the first 8 bars of this song feature a 2-5 approaching the tonic D minor and then setting up the 4 minor with a 2-5. And in this case, we're going to explore the melodic minor in that 4. So let's just take a quick look at these voicings. Starting off, I'm just using a straight up minor 11th voicing, which is really nice and easy to play on guitar. It's a voicing that's just stacked fourths, and because the guitar is tuned in fourths, we can play almost the whole thing with the first finger. Of course, we have to use the middle finger to capture the fourth between the G and B strings, which are tuned in a third. But this voicing is a really great voicing to use in this style of guitar playing. So right off the bat, we want to create this nice, intense rhythmic drive, and the way to do that is to make those chord jabs as short and snappy as possible. So we're just kind of hovering around the 2-5 here. And that immediately sets up the vibe of this song. And we're not having to travel a whole lot. It's just all right in 5th to 7th position. So it's a nice little phrase to grab. Now, when we get into measure 6, we need to set up the 4 chord, which is G minor. So we're going to do that using a 2-5. Now, we could stay down here in 5th position and do the 2-5 here, and that would be totally fine. But in this case, I've chosen to go up a little bit just for a little bit of contrast in the chord voicings. So starting in measure 5, we're going to take our otherwise, kind of static bass line that's staying in the same register, and we're going to move it up to the A up here, just to all of a sudden kind of like take off a little bit with our bass line. So starting in measure 5, our bass goes, and then chromatic approach down into the D, chromatic approach up into the G minor. And we're just using the same voicings as we've seen before. For the A minor 7, we've got just a straight A minor 7 flat 5, that's a nice voicing to use in this case because the first finger is pretty much ready to go to grab that E flat. And it's also ready to go for the F sharp there. So this particular move of a minor 2-5 falls really nicely on the fretboard. You've got this minor, a 7 flat 5 voicing to the dominant 7 sharp 5 voicing. And each of those can easily be connected with a chromatic approach using the index finger. Chromatic approach up. And then from there, I just wanted to kind of capture a minor major 7th sound. Now, this sounds kind of cool, but the truth is that it's a lot easier to grab than a full, like a true minor major voicing. And this sounds just fine, especially in the moment there. The C actually sounds nice. So, when you're playing this style of guitar, it almost seems like you're constantly solving a lot of problems. Like, how can I solve this problem, whether it's a problem in rhythm or a problem in register or a problem in voicing? And a lot of times, I'll just opt for the path of least resistance. If a voicing is easier to play physically, and it sounds reasonably decent, then I'll usually take that one instead of forcing myself to play, I have to use this same minor major 7th voicing, or I have to use this. This is where the rules of theory kind of don't apply so much. I mean, always use your ear as your guide, and your musical sensibilities to let you know. You'll know if something doesn't sound quite right. But so let your ears be your guide, and the point being is don't feel restricted to playing only chord voicings that you think are quote unquote correct, because I think this actually sounds better than the minor major 7. And it's a whole lot easier to play. So that's exactly what we've done in that bar. And from there, we're just making our way back down the fretboard. And it's almost setting up a question and answer type of approach because this is such a dissonant, or it's such an interesting chord, I should say. It's kind of like a mysterious chord. It leaves you hanging. And then we're jumping around a little bit and we're moving back down to this G. And what my ear wants to hear after this is this. It's almost kind of like the intro to Summertime. You just want to hear that resolution. So that's exactly what I've done in beat 3 of measure 8 is play this figure. But now that we're down in third position, now that we're in this region of the neck, I'm just going to take that same voicing, B flat, E, and G, and play it on the top 3 strings so I can grab my low G. So the whole phrase is this. So it's like a question and an answer, and in between the question and answer, you've got this little moving bass line that kind of staggers down at the bottom of the neck. Okay, from there we just move on to a series of 2 5s. And that leads home to 2 measures of F major. Now, what's cool about this song, there are a lot of great characteristics of this song, but what's really nice is we're in the key of D minor, or you can think of the relative major as F major, and we resolve to that in bars 10 through 11 and 12. We're setting up the F, but then it moves to a D major, which is like the parallel major of the original minor, D minor. So what's really interesting with this song is that you get the relative major, F major, to D minor, and the parallel major. Parallel just means the same root. So you have a D major 7 in the context of a song that's in D minor. So it's a really interesting twist that this song takes. So how do we get there? Well, there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. In the first ending, starting with measure 13, I just decided to stay in the neighborhood down here and use an inversion. So basically, it's a D major 7 chord, but with an F sharp, the 3rd, in the bass. And that's just kind of a chord voicing that I really like the sound of, and it fits in this case. So we're up here for F major 9. We're gradually working our way down. And then rather than going to this, that just seems like it's a jump out of nowhere, you know. This G moves really nicely down a half step to the 3rd. And then you can grab a D major 9 voicing here. And then the 5th in the bass, A. And in terms of texture, we're at a cadence, which the word cadence literally translates to kind of a place of rest, a resting place, and that's what we're doing here. We're creating a little temporary moment of rest before we launch onto our next section, which begins in measure 15. So now, instead of just jumping back up to a D minor, I want to keep this continuity going in the bass. So I'm just going to move down to a D minor chord using an F in the bass. And this voicing retains the character of the one that we've set up in measure 13. It's kind of vibey. It's got some open strings in there. And then if we're going to convert that to minor, it's right there. So it's kind of simultaneously an F major voicing, F major 7/6 voicing, but you can also see it in this case as a D minor 9 with an F in the bass. And then we're doing a 2/5, but we're going about it in a slightly different way using these inversions. We've got the 1 over F over the 3rd, and then when we get to the 2 chord, we're playing what looks like a G minor 6, and it is, but it's functioning as an E minor 7 flat 5 with a G in the bass. So you can see the duality. A lot of these shapes, the same chord forms will have multiple functions and multiple purposes. In this case, we're just using it as our 2 that moves nicely into the 5. Now that we can get out of the basement, we'll get back home here with our 5th position D minor 11 voicing. And, we move up to now our more traditional minor 7 flat 5 2 voicing. But instead of just keeping it there, we'll move up here. Now we have a descending motion. So we've set up the 4 chord via another 2/5 leading into measure 21, but this time rather than moving in the higher register of the fretboard, we're keeping it low. And we're staying in there, staying down there. Looking over at measure 23, we have another texture, another rhythmic texture that we've seen before in our other etudes, just to add, again, some contrast to this constantly moving bass line. So what we have here is the chord progression B minor 7 to E7, G minor 7 to C7, 2/2/5 movements here. And we have a repeated bass line, or I should say a bass line that uses 2 repeated notes on the roots of each chord change, and then a delayed attack in the chord voicing part. Now this does 2 things. It creates, a little bit of a variety. Now it interrupts the flow a little bit with another little change in direction, but it also gives you an opportunity to play some different interesting chord voicings that might have a little counter melody in there. So we've got the B minor 7, moving to E7 flat 9, moving to G minor 7, and then C11. So that in of itself is almost like a question and answer. And that resolves too. So it's a nice little melodic move that you can use in your upper structures of the voicing. And what's nice about just keeping the bass relatively static by repeating the roots is that it gives your ears and your listeners' ears an opportunity to hear and focus on what's going on in the top register. And now we're moving. And we're setting up the sound of D major 7 using only a single note bass line. So the best way to do that is just outline either the triad or the 7th chord. And that's exactly what we've done in measures 27 and 28. We're just outlining the chord with an arpeggio. 5, 3, 1, 7, 5, 3, 1. And then a chromatic approach to 29. B flat approaching the A. What's cool about this sound is you've got a major 7 with a sharp 5, and it's just kind of a nice little augmented sound there that you can sneak in. Now we're on to measure 29, and we just have a straight up 2, 5, 1. And with the 1, the G minor chord, I've chosen to make it another minor major 7th. So in this case, it's just a real simple pared down guide tone voicing. So getting into that on 29, we have change positions, minor major 7, and then just move it down. And then a 4 minor 6 to 5 to F major 7 movement. Now we're going to bring it home. Now for the last phrase here, we're going to do something that's almost kind of like a little pedal tone. I mean, it is a pedal basically, but we're not pedaling on the 5, we're pedaling on the root. And again, this creates another texture that you can use to break things up a little bit and to have some interest to your sound. So in measures 37 and 39 on the D, we're just going to keep this quarter note going with the root and keep this nice fourths structure on top. D minor 11 voicing. And then instead of playing a 2-5, we'll just use an E flat 9, and that works because the E flat 7 is like a tritone substitution for the A7. And this is a common device. Wes Montgomery loved to use this when he played Yesterdays, for example, on that recording. He would just, substitute an E flat 7 for the A7. And it's just a different texture that you can use for a sound. So we have this holding steady kind of motion. Back to the D minor 11. Now in measure 40, we're going to break it up a little bit. So we're going to do that in 2 ways. We're going to make this sustained chord short. And we're going to take the bass line down now instead of just staying on the E flat for 4 measures. So now you have this real abrupt contrast that is very effective in closing out this song. So leading into it from measure 37, we have 3, 4. And that right away you break away from that texture that we had with the held notes and the held chords and the repeated notes in the bass. So to wrap it up, we're into measure 41. We're back to our D minor 11. And what that is in the bass line is basically that is capturing the melody of the song. If you know the melody to Alone Together, that's part of the melody. And we're going to reflect that in the bass before we close it out with a flat 6, 7, B flat 7 moving down to A7, and then instead of resolving on the D, the 1, the tonic, a lot of people when they play this song is they end it on the 4 using a dominant chord, and that's what we've done here. So the last phrase starting in 41 is, and then we'll close it out with a little line here. So basically what I've done is chromatically approach, just to end it, chromatically approach the G7 or the G13 chord from above, a half step, A flat, and then from below, using this F sharp 13 voicing, up to G13 with a sharp 11. Now, because it may sound a little empty, so at that point we can keep that going, and we can reach over with the right hand to just either tap, or what I like to do is fret and pluck the low G note.